Hello, crafty friends. I hope you're all having a wonderful day. I'm sure you've all heard about the new Distress watercolor pencils from Tim Holtz. Today I'm going to be trying these out and creating a Christmas card using them. I bought set number 1 before I went whole hog on these pencils. I do love watercolor pencils, however, and I have several different sets in my stash. I also purchased this gorgeous poinsettia stamp set. It's a red rubber stamp set from Tim Holtz. I don't know if this is new on the market, but I saw it on the scrapbook.com website and I just had to have it. I love poinsettia stamps or dies or whatever. So let's open up these Distress watercolor pencils. All of the watercolor pencils I own are encased in wood, and I understand that these are not. They're woodless. So this is going to be fun to try. Let me open up this cute little tin box. You get 12 in each set, and there are 3 different sets. I thought I'd start out with set number 1 because it does include a great variety of different colors, and it also includes a white and a black. Let me pull off this covering here. There we go. My first impression of these pencils are that they're a very nice heavy weight. I liked the feel of them in my hand. I love that they match the Distress ink line. So you can have the coordinating pencil as well as the ink. But I wanted to get a really sharp point on this. I'm using my brass bullet pencil sharpener. I just want to see how sharp I can get this. When I color with watercolor pencils or colored pencils, I like the tip to be really sharp. And it sharpened up nicely. Let's just put a little bit of this down on a piece of craft cardstock. So this one is called Picked Raspberry. And then I'm going to grab another pencil. This one is called Mustard Seed. I'm going to blend these two together just to see if they create an orangey color in between them. They go down nice and smooth and creamy. I liked that. Let's just go back and forth with these 2 pencils and see how good of a blend we can get. And it does start to turn orange in the middle of these 2 colors. I liked that. With watercolor pencils, you can use them just as colored pencils if you'd like. You do not have to use water. However, it's really fun to use a brush to blend and melt these colors out together. I do end up swatching all of these colors off camera just so I know what they look like on paper. And they match perfectly with the Distress Colors line. Let's go ahead and stamp out the poinsettia that I'm going to be coloring with these pencils. I'm using a piece of Stonehenge hot press watercolor paper. And I cut it down to 5.5 by 4.25. And then I'm going to place this in the middle of the paper. I will be fussy cutting this out, so it doesn't really matter where on this paper I stamp it. But I'm using my mini MISTI so that I can stamp it up several times. Hot press watercolor paper is usually really smooth, but I still needed to stamp it out several times just to get a nice dark impression. I pulled out the foam pad in my mini MISTI because this is a thick red rubber stamp. I only showed the one stamping on camera, but I did end up stamping it out 4 or 5 times. The ink I used is VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which is a nice waterproof ink, but I did allow it to dry before I started in on my coloring. This first pencil I'm using is Fired Brick, which is a beautiful maroonish red color. I'm putting a lot of pigment down just so when I come in with my wet paintbrush, I have a lot of pigment on the paper to blend out. I'm coloring at the base of the petals or the bottoms of the petals and slowly drawing the color upward. I'm not going to color in the whole petal just because the paintbrush will pull out the pigment. So let's blend out this color with some water. I have a number 4 round paintbrush. This is from the Black Velvet line. I've had this in my stash for a long time. It's a really nice brush. And I started at the base again, and I'm just slowly drawing the color up the petal I want the pigment to be lighter at the tops of these petals. I found that these colors melt out beautifully. There's no lines or anything left. They just melt out with the water. And they're so fun to play with. If you've never tried watercolors because you're kind of intimidated by them, using a set of watercolor pencils is a great place to start. It gives you a little more control over the watercoloring. So I'm going to continue on with this fired brick pencil. I'm also going to bring in a green pencil. It's called Peeled Paint. So I'm just making do with the colors I have in the set. I wanted a bit of a darker red at the base of these petals. I like a lot of contrast. So you can pull more of the pigment off of the pencil with your brush, or you can wait for your painting to dry and go over it with another layer of the pencil. But of course, I just have this one set, so I didn't have a lot of darker reds to use. So eventually I do come in with my black and just add a little bit of the dark black pencil to the base of these petals. Let's try the green. Again, it's called Peeled Paint. I'm adding most of the pigment to the base again. The more pigment you put down, the creamier it's going to be to blend out. And of course, the more pigment you'll have on the paper. But I really loved these two colors together. So the watercolor pencils that I have and love that are in my stash are the Inktense watercolor pencils, the Faber-Castell watercolor pencils, and the Arteza watercolor pencils. I really enjoy using these three sets of colored pencils. The Inktense pencils are a little bit different from my other two sets in that once your paint has dried, it's permanent. You can't wet it down and move the pigment around anymore. And like the Inktense pencils, these Distress watercolor pencils, once they dry, you can't move them around very much. You can a little bit, but I like that they're more permanent, so you can build up your layers without reactivating the paint. And since having created this card and played with these pencils a little bit, I did go ahead and purchase set 2 and 3. They have a really great price point on these pencils. So I do have the second and the third set in my stash now, and I love them. So I'm going to finish up my painting. I'm going to put a little bit of music on, and I will speed up this video. You can, of course, skip ahead if you want to see the finished results. This card is going to be a multimedia card. So once I'm done with my painting, I'm going to be doing a few other things. So I'll catch you up after I'm finished with the painting. put my painting aside to dry, and once that was dry, I did fussy cut it out, leaving a white border around the edges. Now I'm going to stamp out my sentiment using some Versamark ink. This is a clear, sticky ink, and I'm stamping it onto a piece of graphite cardstock from Spellbinders. This is a nice soft gray. I'll pour over some white embossing powder. I did use a little bit of anti-static powder on this first so that I don't get any white powder strays on this. And then I can melt the sentiment. I love the sentiment that comes in this set. It's really scripty and pretty. It just says, "Christmas greetings." I'm going to use another stamp from this set. This is a text block stamp. And again, I'll ink it up with some Versamark ink. It's going off the side of the paper, but that's okay. And I'll ink it up twice so it's good and sticky. And then I can pour over some more white embossing powder. This white embossing powder shows up really nicely on this graphite cardstock. I'll tap off the excess powder. I'm just going to use my finger just to brush some more of it away. And then I can melt this. I have no idea what it says, but it looks so pretty. There's also a splatter stamp in this little set. And I'm going to stamp that again with the clear Versamark ink a couple of times. And then I'm going to use some green embossing powder. This brings in the red and the green, the classic Christmas colors on this card. I'll just move my panel over just a little bit. And I'm working kind of quickly before the embossing ink dries on the paper. And then I can just pour over the green embossing powder all at once. And this is a really nice embossing powder from Ranger. It shows up beautifully on dark cardstocks. This one is called Leaf Green. Okay, so now I can melt the spatters. And these melt really quickly. I have more strays there that I didn't bother rubbing off because most of them are going to be hidden by the flower. And then it just gives it a look of distressing, so it's really cute. I'll use a piece of rainforest cardstock. It matched really nicely with the leaf green embossing powder. And then I can tape my gray panel onto this. The poinsettia I'm going to pop up with some foam pieces. I put quite a few of them on the back. And then I'm just going to kind of place it around the sentiment. The flower overhangs the edges a little bit, but I'm not going to cut it down. I'm just going to either put it in a larger envelope or hand deliver it. I just liked that look. I'll add some clear, sparkly stickles to the center of the poinsettia. And I forgot that I wanted to add some Distress Oxide ink. So I'm pulling in some mint tape. I'm going to cover the sides of my rainforest green cardstock. And then I'll blend on some Distress Oxide ink, the Fired Brick, and that's the same color I used with the watercolor pencil. I love that these coordinate. It's so much fun. I'll use a blending brush to blend this over the sentiment. And it does turn the sentiment red, but that's all right. I'm going to use a tissue just to buff that off. And then it's just going to leave a little bit of color on the corner of this card. The excess ink just buffs away easily over this embossing. And then I can peel off the mint tape and reuse it. I'm going to add a little more color to the top left corner of this card as well. I'm just trying to tuck it under the panel a little bit. And then use more of the Fired Brick Distress Oxide ink. I'll lift up one of the petals of this flower so I could get some ink under there. But it gives it such a pretty touch. I'll use the tissue again to buff the ink from the white embossing. And here is a close-up look at the finished card. I had so much fun putting this one together. And I do recommend these Distress watercolor pencils from Tim Holtz. There are so many other techniques that you can do with these pencils, and I've seen a lot of different crafters use them. They're a very versatile set. I'll leave the links to these fabulous pencils in the description box, as well as the links to the other products that I used to create this card today. I bought my first set from scrapbook.com, and when I went to purchase sets 2 and 3, they were out already, so I went over to the Rangers website and purchased them there. I think they go in and out of stock a lot. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. I hope you have a fun, crafty day. I'll be back again really soon with another video. Bye!